Good morning and happy Super Bowl Sunday. I'm Jen Jaksa, and I am pleased to welcome you to First Church Unitarian in Littleton, Mass. A special welcome to anyone visiting today. We all are welcome. This month's Soul Matters theme is Beloved Community. So please check out Community Matters for ways to further enrich our community, including a unique opportunity to share your own musical offering during a church service. Pretty cool. Also, the Standing Committee asks that you watch for important emails this week about the upcoming stewardship event. With your participation, it will truly be a celebration of our beloved community. Welcome to church.
Good morning, I'm Molly Lozeau, your music director here at First Church Unitarian. I wanted to introduce the Prelude for today. It's called The Entertainer, and it's by Scott Joplin. He was a composer at the turn of the century, the turn of the 1900s. He's from Arkansas, but he lived in lots of different cities around America trying to get his music played and published. He wrote a lot of piano music, and he taught a lot of other pianists who would go on to write more ragtime music. This piece you'll hear is a very typical encapsulation of like his style of ragtime music. So here is The Entertainer.
On any given Sunday, you can find us huddled together or virtually huddled, looking for community and purpose in the light of our screens, cheering each other onward and upward. On any given Sunday, it could be the day that we find the strength to take a knee for justice, whatever the cost, and harness the fire of commitment to make the world a more beautiful place with a mighty love. The words of Duke Ellington in our own hymnal say it so well. Lord, dear Lord above, God Almighty, God of love, please look down and see my people through. Come Sunday, oh come Sunday, that's the day. Let us worship. Now's the time in our service for our chalice lighting, and this morning we will be led by Fergus Abreu.
Love is the spirit of this church, and service its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another.
Thank you, Fergus. You're getting really good at getting that light out at the end. So welcome to First Church Unitarian here in Littleton, Massachusetts. My name is Lara Hoke, and I'm so lucky to be the minister of this amazing congregation. I join with Jen and Molly in welcoming you. I'm so glad you found us, and please feel free to ask questions. Check out the website if this is your first time, fculittle.org. And you can be in touch with me or somebody else. Glad to have you here. This morning, we are talking and thinking together, thinking theologically, theological reflection, something you learn in divinity school. We'll be thinking about football. And just so there's no confusion, we're talking about American football. All right? Although this ball was made in India. That's okay. So, without any further ado, I invite you back into a spirit of worship for our opening hymn. It's number 347 in the hymnal, Gather the Spirit, a great UU classic by Jim Scott, and the words will be on the image. We sound pretty good, don't we? It's the time for all ages now. If you have any kids there with you, you're going to want to bring them here. We have something wonderful, and you're not going to want to go away either. We have Time for All Ages, a story told by Ron Willett and Bill Mitchell. Enjoy.
Hello, I'm Ron Willett,
And I'm Bill Mitchell.
and we're here in this Time for All Ages to read a story.
Today's story is I'm Bored, and it is brought to you by the writer Michael Ian Black.
With illustrations by Debbie Ridpath OE.
And a potato.
I'm bored, blah, I'm so bored. Hey, a potato.
A potato?
What am I supposed to do with a potato?
Boing!
Ow!
I'm bored.
You want to do something?
Sure.
What do you like to do?
I don't know. I like flamingos.
There are no flamingos around here.
Well, that's disappointing. I'm bored.
How can a potato be bored?
Because I have to hang around with a kid. Kids are boring.
What are you talking about? Kids are fun.
Prove it.
We can turn cartwheels
Boring.
and skip
Boring.
or spin around in circles until we get dizzy, almost throw up.
Boring.
Kids can play games
Boring.
and do ninja kicks
Boring.
and walk on our hands. See?
Boring.
You know what else? Kids can imagine stuff.
What kind of stuff?
Like this. See? Now I'm a famous ballerina.
Boring.
Now I'm a lion tamer with the most ferocious lion in the world.
Boring.
Oh, yeah? Well, now I'm a fairy princess with my own castle and dragons and unicorns and stuff.
Boring.
Kids can swing.
Boring.
Kids can jump.
Boring.
Kids can fly. Kids can do anything.
Boring. 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 Boring.
Boring?
Boring. Boring.
How can you possibly think kids are boring when we can do all this cool stuff and think all these amazing thoughts and be anything we want to be? I'd rather be a kid than a potato any day.
Ooh, hey, a flamingo. Now we can finally have some fun.
I'm bored.
Hope you enjoyed that.
Oh, wow. You know, sometimes the halftime show is better than the game itself. And this might be one of those situations. I should just stop now. It's all downhill from here. Thank you, Ron and Bill. That was fun. And that's for all you bored potatoes today who don't care about the Super Bowl. It's in your honor. To each their own, right? So I wonder if the bored potato has any relationship to the screaming latke from our Hanukkah time for all ages. I'll have to look that up in my Funkin' Waggle. This now is the time for our offering, time for sharing our generosity. This congregation is self-supporting, relying on the generosity of our members and friends. We rely on your gifts of talent and time, which you give so abundantly. And when you are able, we also rely on your gifts of treasure or money. If you are able and you can make an offering this morning or make a pledge payment, you can either send it into our address, same as usual, or you can find that address if you need more time on our website, fculittle.org, or you can click on the yellow donate button once you get there and figure out how you can donate online. We thank you for your generosity. This morning's offering will now be given and received in grateful appreciation.
I wanted to tell you a little bit about the composer for today's offertory, Ulysses K. He was born in 1911, so he was living, growing up in the 20s and the 30s. And he actually ended up joining the U.S. Navy as a musician. And after that, he started composing. And he really wrote in a style that we call neoclassical, which kind of sounds like Mozart or Beethoven or any of those famous classical composers that you might hear. And he also did a lot of teaching and a lot of performing. And this particular piece is from a series called Essays, which I think is interesting. He wrote 10 essays on piano, each with like a different topic. And this piece is called Tender Thought.
A few hours from now, as I'm sure you know, whether you care or not, the Super Bowl will be played, the annual championship game of the National Football League. Super Bowl 49 between the Patriots and the Seahawks 6 years ago is the #1 most watched television broadcast in US history. In fact, of the top 30 most watched television broadcasts in US history, 29 of those slots are the Super Bowl in various years. Only one non-Super Bowl creeps in the top 30, and that's the series finale of MASH in at number 9. Impressive. By any measure, the Super Bowl is the most watched program of the year in this country. It's not officially a national holiday, but it almost feels like one. Super Bowl parties are right up there with 4th of July barbecues. Americans eat more food on Super Bowl Sunday than any day of the year, other than Thanksgiving. Fans spend more than $50 million on food during Super Bowl weekend. And yes, this is Super Bowl Sunday. It might not be on liturgical church calendars, but Super Bowl Sunday is a secular red letter day, no doubt about it. The Super Bowl has become a huge money-making spectacle with touches of excess and commercialism, extreme commercialism, in addition to being a sporting event. But I'm not here to judge you or to make you feel guilty about watching the Super Bowl later today, as I will plan to do. I want to remind us today that football is, in fact, one of our great national pastimes and a sport with unique and worthy aspects. Today, I want to reflect with you about what we can learn about ethics, maybe even the mysteries of life, through thinking about football. My humble hope is that later today, in addition to eating chips and drinking the beverage of your choice and deciding what your favorite commercial is, my hope is that you'll think a little bit about the meaning or theology of football, at least just a little tiny bit. In addition to watching the Super Bowl most years, or at least being in a room where others are watching the Super Bowl, or maybe just being near that room, if you grew up in the United States, there's a good chance that you've had some sort of connection to football. Perhaps a few of us actually played an organized version of the sport with helmets and shoulder pads and so on, whether pee-wee football or some sort of school team. More of us undoubtedly have played an informal version of the game, whether two-hand touch or flag football, whether by choice in a pickup game or whether under duress, during phys ed in school. Some of us might have been cheerleaders or marching band members, all part of the show and spectacle of even local football games. And probably a lot of us watched football games when we were students for the social event and the FaceTime factor, if not the actual game, not unlike some of us watched the Super Bowl itself. Football is a part of our lives, even if just peripherally. Being a sports fan, I've read lots of books and seen lots of movies on sports. In particular, I've noticed some interesting difference between football fiction and baseball fiction. With baseball fiction, there's often a very mystical sense. Think of baseball books and movies like The Natural or Field of Dreams. They involve lots of supernaturalism. But football movies and books like North Dallas 40 or The Longest Yard, they're much more down to earth and gritty. You can find nostalgia in books and movies about football, just as those about baseball. But with football, the story narratives trend away from supernaturalism and trend, if anything, toward super realism. Hail Mary passes and immaculate receptions notwithstanding. Baseball is a quaint sport in many ways, evolving from the gentlemanly sport of cricket. Football, on the other hand, evolved from the rough and tumble sport of rugby, and it has a more modern pace and feel. As the great American journalist Mary McGrory put it, baseball is what we were. Football is what we have become. A theology of football, if nothing else, makes us focus on the here and now, the down to earth. It's perhaps more immanent than transcendent. It's more a sense of God or the divine with us, rather than God or the divine out there, away from us. And so it might not be as idyllic or otherworldly as a theology of baseball, but perhaps it's easier to translate into our daily round. The great Vince Lombardi, namesake of the NFL championship trophy, said, "Football is like life. It requires perseverance, self-denial, hard work, sacrifice, dedication, and respect." And it's true, to be good at football, one needs to be in shape. It's hard physical work. And one needs to really know the playbook, their own playbook and the opponent's playbook, which is hard mental work compared to many sports. I can't think of another team sport that involves so much pre-planning. Other sports, yes, they work out plays and X's and O's, sure. But in basketball, hockey, soccer, there's only so much you can really work out in advance. Basketball, hockey, soccer, you're being quickly reactive much of the time, even on offense. In football, there are great pauses, if you want them, before each offensive play. The players and or coaches decide what play they'll run. Of course, there's no guarantee it will go as planned or that it will go as practiced, but you're not quickly going back and forth between offense and defense on the fly. The system of downs in football means that, barring turnovers, you have 4 chances to get it right on offense each time. And so the theology of football suggests that you can work out a plan for your life. Better yet, you can work it out with others, considering your strengths and weaknesses. Creation can be intelligent, not just reactive. There's a true sort of intelligent design in football, maybe more than any other sport I could think of. But football isn't all about having lots of chances. In baseball and basketball and hockey, at least at the professional level, A team comes into town and you play a series of games with them. If you lose the first game, maybe you'll win the next day. There's an instant shot at redemption. But in football, for the most part, your chances come a week apart. You have to be even more patient for a chance at redemption with a team that just beat you. You definitely won't play them again the next day, probably not even the next week. You might not even play them again the next year. It's sort of like a purgatory. This is particularly tough in the postseason. Lose one game and you're out. And the Super Bowl is just one big game, not a best of 7 series. And that's part of the spectacle of it all, of course. But the roughness of football doesn't allow for a best of 7 series. Injuries and wear and tear make it impossible to play that frequently. So a theology of football says that yes, there are second chances in life, but they don't necessarily come around every day. Carpe diem. You have to seize the opportunity. When it finally comes around, you must make it count, because who knows when the chance will come around again. Last week, we thought together about time. Football has its own sense of time. I suppose all sports do. In baseball, like cricket, there's no clock. It's sort of timeless in that it takes as long as it takes. Football, like several other team sports, has a clock. But football is about clock management more than any other sport. In hockey and soccer, clock management is there, but it's minimal. The clock mainly runs out so that we know when to stop playing. And basketball has some clock management issues, especially at the end, and there's a shot clock and so on. But football takes clock management to a whole new level. There's a play clock, for one thing, but there's so much strategy about managing the time that you have to play. For one thing, some plays involve stopping the clock and others don't. There's so much you can do to make the minutes tick down faster, or with skill, to stop the clock again and again. A theology of football says that time does and doesn't rule our lives. Game time isn't real time, whatever that is. And a 2-minute warning of football game time usually stretches far beyond 2 minutes of clock time. Yes, we all live by the same rules of what we have agreed to as our concept or how we conceptualize time. But with care and skill, you can take some control of the shared illusion of this thing called time, that ticking clock. Naturally, there are some limits to this in football and in life. When it comes to death in life or to sudden death in football, you do hit the limits of clock management. But it's like Coach Lombardi said, we didn't lose the game, we just ran out of time. The football huddle is another singular phenomenon in sports. The verb huddle means to crowd together, to nestle closely. For example, the dictionary says they huddled together for warmth. In other team sports, you huddle before the game, perhaps during timeouts, but in football, you huddle between just about every play. This gives football an interesting warmth and camaraderie, particularly for such a rough sport. Of course, not everyone agrees with me that this is charming. According to journalist George Will, football combines the two worst things about America. It is violence punctuated by committee meetings. Well, I guess I don't see huddles as being like committee meetings, but I cannot disagree that football is violent. As the Michigan State coach Duffy Daugherty said, football is not a contact sport, it's a collision sport. In fact, many even compare football to war, or stand in or substitute for war, or it's like watching gladiators in the Colosseum. In recent years, we've become more aware of the dangers of concussions, which are so common in football, and which can lead to serious problems later, like dementia or major depression. I cannot really justify ethically the great violence involved in higher levels of football. Yet I must admit that for me, watching tackle football is more entertaining than watching flag football or two-hand touch. I suppose the theology of football might say that life is fragile and that there is no such thing as safety, since we all face the same fate. We are all mortal. We all run out of time. This isn't to say that we shouldn't try to protect ourselves from serious physical injury, nor is it to say that we should be casual about our health. But perhaps the theology of football says that life isn't about playing it safe. It isn't about self-protection. A theology of football asks us to face life's dangers and fears. A theology of football guides us to face challenges head on, not to be avoidant. As author and singer Chris Jamie says, in life, as in football, you get hit the hardest when trying to run or hide from a problem. Like being on a football field, putting all focus on evading only one defender, or I would add issue, is asking to be blindsided. And of course, the theology of football tells us that the real test isn't avoiding life's hard knocks. To quote again Coach Lombardi, it's not whether you get knocked down, it's whether you get up. It all sounds pretty brutal, but for me, one of the most wonderful things about football is just how team-oriented it is. In baseball, there's so much that's individual, like pitching and batting. You're kind of on your own, really. And in a sport like basketball, so often the team with the best individual player ends up being the best team, period. It's true that the position of quarterback in football is really important, and the quarterback carries a lot of responsibility for the outcome of the game, but a quarterback can't win by himself or herself. A perfect pass still has to be caught. And really, there won't be any quarterback performance to speak of if the offensive line doesn't protect the quarterback, or if the ball isn't snapped reasonably well, and so on. Speaking of snapping a football, there are just so many key, if specialized, roles in football, and they all require such amazingly different skill sets. The skills of a center who snaps the ball and blocks are so different from that of a wide receiver who has to be such a swift runner and then catch the ball. And kickers and holders and long snappers and other special teams players, I can't think of another team sport with so many unique roles and skill sets required. A theology of football reminds us of all these things. A theology of football reminds us that we are not in this alone, that things are better when we work together for something beyond ourselves, and that everyone has a role to play. And those roles might look very different, even when there's a shared common goal. It certainly applies to church life. Speaking of special teams plays, football also features the punt. When the downs have run out and the offense decides it can do no more, the punter comes out to kick or to punt the ball to the other team. Punt is one of those great sports terms that has become part of our daily vernacular. When we say we're punting something, we're saying we're procrastinating and dealing with it, or we're giving it to somebody else, putting it in their responsibility. In football, traditionally, punting is a way of playing a little more conservatively, playing a little safer. Old-time college football coach and college MVP namesake John Heisman said, "When in doubt, punt." A theology of football acknowledges that sometimes giving up with grace is the right call. It's the serenity prayer of football. Give me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Always easier said than done, and always an easier call on Monday morning than it was Saturday, or Sunday rather. In closing, football, like all team sports, is often seen as being all about winning. And yes, Coach Lombardi famously said, "Winning isn't everything, it's the only thing." But here I have to disagree. It's just like that lesson from Vedanta, that ancient wisdom tradition of Hinduism that I've talked with you about before several times. Life isn't about a goal. A mature theology of football says that it's really about the striving and about being in the moment and about being there for each other. I believe that thoughtful football players and coaches know this. So I want to close by sharing the inspirational halftime speech given in the movie Friday Night Lights. In the movie, with his team losing, Coach Gaines, who's played by Billy Bob Thornton, talks to his high school players. All season long, his mantra to them has been, "Be perfect." But it isn't until his halftime speech in the final game of the season that he explains what that means to him. He says, "For a long time now, you've heard me talk about being perfect. Well, I want you to understand something. To me, being perfect is not about winning. It's about you and your relationship to your family and your friends. Being perfect is about being able to look your friends in the eye and know that you didn't let them down because you did everything that you could. There wasn't one more thing that you could have done. Can you live in that moment with clear eyes and love in your heart, with joy in your heart? If you can do that, then you're perfect," he said. May we all know the perfection of striving, of a commitment to excellence, the perfection of being there for others, and a commitment to their well-being and to seeing all our fellow human beings through. The perfection of living in the moment with a commitment to being and spreading love and joy. May it be so. Blessed be, and amen. Our closing hymn today is number 1028, another UU written hymn, The Fire of Commitment, and you will again see the words in the video. You saw in that video there when we sang that for our closing hymn that we were just about to get together and hold hands in a circle. So someday we will do that again. For now, as is our tradition online, I invite you, if there's someone there that you can safely hold hands with, to do that now. If you are alone in a room, as I am here, I invite you to put your hands together and feel that warmth and think of this wonderful community. And these are our closing words. Friends, can we together each bring forward our unique skill set, our unique passions and energies and talents to create something truly wonderful? Can we bring all our people through? Will we challenge ourselves to take a stand or a knee for justice, to side with love, come what may? Can we do that with love and joy in our hearts, trying so hard not to let down our family and friends and others on this planet? If so, then we are perfect. May we strive for this loving perfection. Blessed be, and amen.
And our postlude today comes from Coleridge-Taylor Perkinson. He was actually named after a British composer, Samuel Coleridge-Taylor. And as soon as I heard this piece, I loved it. It's exciting, and it definitely fits in my hands really well. Coleridge-Taylor Perkinson wrote a lot of music, not just for solo piano, but for other combinations of instruments, including orchestras and choirs and other music like that. He was from the New York area, and he got his master's degree from the Manhattan School of Music. He wrote in a mixture of like classical and jazz together. Here is his Toccata, which I've taken from a concert I performed a couple weeks ago with the Concord Chorale, another organization that I play with. And I really hope you enjoy it.
Wow. That was amazing, Molly. Thank you. If you're still here, this is like watching the closing credits, and there's a surprise bonus at the scene because Mike pointed out the candles look a little bit like goalposts. And that makes me think of the old country song, "Drop kick me Jesus through the goalposts of life. I got the will, Lord, if you've got the toe." It's good. See you on Zoom.